Please join me in welcoming Sid Sachs right now and soon Gary Kuehn.
And before I start, I'd really like to thank Matthew and Stephen and Cindy and Gary. This is the first exhibit I've curated since the demise of the University of the Arts. And also, I've worked in gallery. I worked in 4 commercial galleries and for 25 years at the University of the Arts. 2 of the galleries were in the Art Dealers Association. I've handled everything from Soutines to Rothko's. And I've never seen a staff handle artwork better and more professionally than this staff. So anyway, so I'll do this really quickly, and then we'll have some time. And I named it this pretentious title because I'm trying to situate Gary, contextualize Gary, not necessarily in space, but in the world. Okay, so as we heard, Gary, of course it's not going, now that I let it stop. Okay, so he went to Drew University as undergraduate, and then he went to Rutgers University for graduate school in one of the earliest days of Rutgers. And Rutgers history, the art department is really notable. It's one of the top art schools in the country, the studio department. So what we have here are some really early works. On the left is a work by Jan Capro called Woman Out of Fire from 1955, and it's tar. And this is a material that Gary knows very well, and so does Joe Fife, and we'll talk about that later. And on the right is a small, tiny piece of rags and plaster by Lucas Samaras from 1959 when he was an undergraduate student at Rutgers. But these kind of eccentric, kind of figurative process works are something you'll see with Rutgers works as we go on. So these are some Lucas Samaras works, some of his boxes, 2 portraits with, those are pins. And there's a lot of S&M material with Lucas Samaras' works and performances. And another thing they're yarn, a box with yarn then cut apart and separated. These are really early photographs of Roy Lichtenstein, who was Gary's teacher in graduate school. And on the left, he's stepping on one of his abstract expressionist paintings. When he was hired at Rutgers, he was doing sort of late abstract expressionist paintings. And that's some canvases he's using as a drop cloth or something like that. When I was in grad school, I went to graduate school in '73, I went to a closet, and there were 2 abstract expressionist paintings in that closet, left over. They were just left there for 10 years. Anyway, and on the right is a portrait of him, and you know that he projected images onto the canvas early on and then drew them, so it's a joke about image duplicator, but it's from a comic book. Anyway, early pop art. Over there is another hot dog by Bob Watts. It's a gold-plated hot dog. And Bob Watts is known for a Fluxus artist, but early on he was sort of on the edge of pop art also. But he sort of got annoyed at how all of a sudden there was like 5 pop artists, and maybe he was neglected or maybe he didn't think he was that. He was a really cantankerous, really funny guy. I loved him. So he tried to patent the word pop and take it off the marketplace, because pop art was a name that Lawrence Alloway came up with. But it was called New Realism. It had different other terms over the years. He was not successful because there were already Tootsie Roll Pops and other things on the marketplace. Is that Letty Eisenhower? And Les Levine? Is that Letty in the portrait on the left?
I don't remember it. No.
Okay. Anyway, who do you think it is? I don't know. I'm just thinking it's Letty.
Yeah, maybe it's Letty. I don't know.
No, it's not Letty.
It's not Letty?
No, I know Letty.
Okay, well, the Bob Watts show at Beyond
Oh, you
Keeney.
mean the woman on the left?
Yeah, the woman on the left.
That could be Letty.
Okay. Anyway, that's a show of Bob's bianchini, and there's, I think, you can see the hot dogs, I think, on that plate. And on the right are these little eggs that he did, and he put them in egg cartons, and they're chrome plated and flocked. And this is Gary and Nancy, his first wife, and they're at a performance with Joe Jones, who was sort of a Fluxus artist. And if you look, you can see Gary's attitude towards the work. He was, like, what the hell is this? And over on the right there is a poster for Yam Day, and that was done at George Siegel's farm. Yam was in May of, I don't know,
1963.
63, okay. But it was, the Fluxus artists were trying to get away from the commercialism of the art world, because Matrunas had been bankrupt and he was kind of lefty from Eastern Europe. So Yam is May backwards. It's also maybe May Wilson. It's like a lot of things. But there's just, anyway, George Siegel's farm was a place. He had a big farm and people would go to picnics there over the years. The Yam Day, there was actually a film of that. That Smolin Gallery brought a bus down there, and Yvonne Rayner's dancing on top of the roof, and Wolf Costello's digging TV sets on the ground and stuff like that. Anyway, let's get back to Philadelphia. So in 1962, in October 1962, the Jewish Y on Pine Street, Billy Kluwer did the first East Coast pop art show, and the second one in the United States. And that's Bob Watts there on the bottom left. And on the right is, on November 7th, 1962, Alan Capro did a happening called Chicken that Alex DeCorte redid a few years ago. And that's photographed by...
Peter Moore?
No. It's by a guy named Sable. It's Audrey Sable's husband, who was NFL Films. I can't think of his first name. Anyway. So this is the same show, and you can see in the foreground is George Siegel. Way in the background on the left is Bob Watts stuff. There's a little stamp machine by Bob Watts. Bob Watts made stamps that come out of the machines. The piece between the George Siegel and the Bob Watts is the Jim Dine. There's a black rectangle hanging down. That's Oldenburg's Blue Pants. It was a great, great, great show. And you can't see the Lichtenstein in this photograph. There's a little Lichtenstein of an electric cord that's hanging out right above Bob Watts. Anyway, so George Siegel was at Rutgers and a really big influence, and at that time was sort of associated with pop art because he was using direct casting as opposed to modeling. He had been part of Hansa Gallery with Cantor and others. And he was using new materials like lighting and plastics and formica, along with real space. So, but he was also influential to Gary because Gary's brother had studied art in high school with George, who was a chicken farmer, but who had two kids, one of whom had disabilities, and he had to always kind of work other jobs. So he was a high school art teacher, and the reason that he went to Rutgers in the MFA program is to make more money so that he could, take care of his kids. He was so successful, he never had to teach or do anything after that. But anyway, George Siegel was a big influence on Gary. And the man with his hand on the table, that's Capro. And the woman kind of with her hands crossed is Helen Siegel. There's a real table, direct casting of the people, a direct mirror. This is Gary cast in the gas station, which is in Ottawa, in the National Gallery in Ottawa. That's a real Coca-Cola machine. He's holding a real Coca-Cola bottle. He's sitting on Coca-Cola stands. Those are real tires, etc., etc. But the glass window is the construction that George did. So it's like, it's the space of real bodies because it's cast directly from the real body and combined with real materials in the real world. That's where it fits into pop. I knew Gary was in many of George's works. On the right hand side, there is a picture of Gary as a roofer, and he's doing tar because Gary was doing construction work when he's going through college. And the roofing company was J.P. Fife, and it was a company in New Jersey that did roofing construction work. And Joe Fife, who's a really noted artist, painter, and critic, is right over there. That is J.P. Fife's father, and that was the employer of Gary. So the world comes around very quickly. Anyway, there's Gary in a bar, and there's a real neon sign watching a real TV set. So the real world interacts with the illusionistic world combined. Okay. So Gary is coming to school in 1962, and on those farms, at Yam Day and other places, in swimming pools at George Siegel's and dinners at George Siegel's, everybody was trying to figure out what's the next thing. What can I do next? Pop art starts, the first shows of pop art in 61, and the first minimalist shows are in 62. Gary's in grad school in 62, starts graduate school in 62. So there's pop art and there's minimalism. So this is the nominal 3 dedicated to William of Ockham by Flavin. It's the simplest division of space that you can have on a wall. 1, 2, 3, the middle, the 2 sides, 1, 2, 3. Just industrial fluorescent tubes, found objects, whatever. These are Donald Judd's, very simple progressions. But these are fabricated. Donald Judd will make a drawing. He has a metal place fabrication, place make it. Candy apple lacquers on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, there's a metal sheath with plexiglass, like day-glow plexiglass. You have to have money to get these made. So these are both 1968 Donald Judds. This is Gary Kuehn, where he's taking sort of the simple shape of minimalism, but he's using really kind of everyday materials. He's rented out a farm, so he's taking straw, he's taking handmade construction to make that simple open grid. It's almost the green part is almost like a solid width from that time period, or a little bit later. And then to connect the straw and this green cube, he has a plate and he bolts it together. He's doing construction work. He knows how things are manufactured, how they're made. This is the simplest way to do it, to kind of have, and it's the organic and the inorganic kind of combined. There was an essay by Donald Judd, he called it things, specific objects. He didn't like the term minimalism. These specific objects were things were not painting, not sculpture, there was something in between. And this is part painted and part sculptural. So, and it's after the 1950s with assemblages by Rauschenberg, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where Gary is coming into history, and he's still a student, or right after that. These are, you can't see it, but this is downstairs, it's bolted together, and it's really actually miniature. I think I saw this probably 50 years ago. I have to tell you, I was one of Gary's students 50 years ago. I was his TA, so I've known Gary for 50 years. So that's one of the reasons it came about. I did show Gary's work 2 other times. Once a sculpture and once a drawing in the 1980s, but that was in Philadelphia. That was the last time I showed Gary's work, and I've done a lot of shows since the 1980s. Anyway, natural materials and culture and non-cultural combined. The piece on the left is kind of a famous early Gary Kuehn. That plaster piece is kind of like the plaster that you see with George Siegel. And what it started out as, Gary went over to Piscataway, where they had Camp Kilmer, and there were leftover things from the Second World War, and there were these kind of like vinyl canteens that you would fill up with water if you were needed to take water around, and he took that and he covered it with plaster to make that pillow shape. And the other shape is just the way straw was baled. On the right-hand side, there's a bundle of twigs with a kind of bolted together with a rectangle. So these are the straw piece is 1963, the branch piece is 64. So this is still graduate school. or right after.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, for me, these things were really loaded with content. That's actually a body bag.
Oh,
The nuclear from a survival kit that had some biscuits to eat, a container for water, and that's actually a body bag for fatalities. So it's kind of loaded with Cold War stuff and as well, just to throw it in.
oh, that's good. Or bad, whether how you look at it. These are two pieces from 1968, and they're, these are kind of out of context, a little bit out of sequence, a little bit. But Gary, one of the things that he was thinking about is sculptures in the 1960s started coming off of pedestals and going directly on the floor. But in this case, the floor became a base, kind of like Brancusi, and then sculpture is just that fiberglass part bolted to the top or sloped over to the top. There's another one from '69. And here's another sloping piece, and then we have a kind of crated fiberglass piece. Like this is kind of a travel case that you could, like if you didn't want to make a crate, you could cheaply make a travel case, but it becomes part of the piece.
The thinking here was kind of about shame, failure, humility. In the piece on the right, the mattress that can't hold itself sags into the wall, no character, no inner strength. And then the companion on the left was about the rigidity maybe of a political system that doesn't allow this kind of failure or relaxation. So it was playing two things against each other, maybe the inclination to relax, and on the left, impossibility of relaxing or some kind of authoritarian aspect. It's pretty open where you can take it, and I'm always happy where it has an ambiguity.
This is a piece that's downstairs, and it's really funny. I probably saw this years ago. And then I chose it from digital files. And then when I got here, the sawhorses are not standard size sawhorses. I thought it was going to be table size. I thought it was going to be like 32 inches or something tall. It's miniature. So they're not, it alludes to a workbench. It alludes to a work table, but it's not. And also the way it sags, again, it's not functional. It's kind of like it can't, it's lost its functionality. It's been diminished by its failure to keep the rigidity.
Figurative reference, let's say, one who's not strong enough to maintain a push-up position, just sag in the middle of the next push-up. You did one, but you never made it to two. And then the sawhorses, I wanted to avoid the table reference in that respect, but I didn't want it on the floor. I made other pieces that connect with the floor in that way. So that's it. With that, also, wherever you can take it, it has a lot of possibilities.
So the other one slants horizontally, this slants vertically. It's kind of like a John McCracken that's on a bad day. That's an art reference that maybe it's not. This is a really interesting photograph I happened to find. 1955, that man with the tie is George Siegel, and he's teaching the art club at Rutgers University. And that's the right height of a table, and he's using sawhorses. So I just thought that was appropriate in some weird way. And then here's Gary's piece on the left, and on the right is a 1966 piece by Tom Doyle that also sags. But look how minimal Gary's piece is. compared to the Doyle, which is almost Baroque. Doyle is known now as Eva Hess's ex-husband, but at one time he was the famous person of the pair. Both with fiberglass, both with color. Doyle's trying to be really aggressive, and also it's called Over Alice Creek, which is like the Ambrose Bierce sort of story. It's about Civil War. He's a Civil War buff. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting juxtaposition. It's about the same time period. Here's a piece where that green panel in the center is passive. It's just sitting in there resting. It's sort of on skew. It's not lined up with any geometry. It doesn't have to be bolded because gravity holds it together. There's a piece in the show here that has a slot that another piece could fit into. Okay, so this is, in November of 1964, we're going back a little bit. This is at Bianchini Gallery. Bianchini Gallery was a gallery that this guy Paul Bianchini ran. He had a young person working there, Dorothy, who became Dorothy Lichtenstein. He had a guy named Ben Barillo who was working there, who was friends with Warhol. The Brillo boxes might have been a pun on Ben Barillo. Anyway, so he was really, at one time, was really interested in printing and in reproduction. And Pat Hill, where is he?
I'm here now.
What?
Over here.
Okay. Oh, Pat Hill was married to Bianchini, and she was a person who did reproductive work. Anyway, so he did a show in 1964, November 1964, called The American Supermarket. On the left is our chrome-plated fruits in a real box by Bob Watts, and on the left is a picture from Life magazine, and that freezer cabinet is an Archwater. And I wanted to put, Archwater was doing a lot of furniture work and Formica work, and I wanted to borrow this for a show one time at Rutgers in Camden. He said, well, I had to downsize and I put it out on the street. So that piece doesn't exist. There's a Campbell soup can by Warhol, and then real Campbell soup cans that he signed if you wanted the cheap version. There's Billy Apple, and here are some eggs by Bob Watts over here that are they're plastic Easter eggs, I think. They're polychrome. Anyway, so Gary comes to see the show, and he meets Dorothy, and they hit it off. And Dorothy invites him to have a show at Bianchini Gallery. So this is the poster for Bianchini in February of 1967, so it's the next year. And there are, if you look at the rectangle, and there's like a melted pod there underneath in the drawing, he was doing some construction work in New Jersey, and there was a wooden mold, and they were pouring concrete, and it burst. It couldn't hold all the weight, and it poured concrete all over the landscape. It's kind of a dangerous, traumatic thing that he experienced, and those pores come out of that experience. He also, from his notebook, he just writes, "Butter in the sun, what could be more fatal?" in June of 1966, and sometimes it looked like some kind of visceral issue. Sometimes it looked like butter melting, literally. He also did some pieces in his farm with tar and wood and cardboard that have kind of, by the heat and by the weathering, have melt down. These are from 1967. So he's getting kind of known, he's getting seen, he's getting some traction. And Luce Lepard puts him in a show called the Eccentric Abstraction Show. The poster over here is this little poster that's on fake pigskin. It's got like stippled things. And the people in it are Alice Adams, who's going to have a show at the Courteau with Eva Hess and Hannah Wilke, I think. Louise Bourgeois, who was not that well known until this show, although she had been working in the 40s. She just, all of a sudden, her career took off. Eva Hess, who was really young, and her career took off, her short career took off. Who else is in it? Gary. Bruce Nauman, who we all know. Don Potts, who you probably don't know, Keith Saunier, who was just in graduate school right after Gary at Rutgers, and Frank Lincoln Viner, who's still alive. And actually, Lucid Party put it together. He was friends with Frank, and actually it was his idea, not his idea, but his work that kind of put the impetus to it. And on the right-hand side is a piece that was in the show that was in a review in Art International, and also late the next year gets into the Whitney Biennial in sculpture. This is a picture of that show, and unfortunately Gary's in that next room. But that stringy thing is Bruce Nauman. The things coming down on the right-hand side are early Keith Saunier's. I think these pieces on the floor are Don Potts. And then this is Alice Adams. She had been a weaver originally, and this is chain link fence and wire. There was a lot of, Bill Bollinger was working in chain link fence, Rafi Farrar was working in chain link fence. It was like these new materials, everybody was experimenting with new materials. And again, these sag, like what Gary's doing, gravity. So this is the piece. There were two pieces in sculpture, American sculpture of the 60s that went to LA County Museum and then came to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And this was one of the pieces. The other one had cedar shape coming down on the side. So he has a show at Fishback Gallery. Fishback Gallery is where the eccentric abstraction show was when Donald Droll was the director, who was really progressive. A couple years later, Aladar Marburger from Cheltenham comes in and shifts the whole program to representational painting. But during this time period, it was really progressive, and it was, I don't know, we can talk about that later. I'm not sure that's progressive, but it had an abstract stance, and it shifts to a more representational painting. So there is the piece that you'll see a couple pieces that you'll see downstairs, and that curved piece on the floor and the curved piece on the wall, circular piece on the wall, are two metals clamped together, aluminum and steel, and the coefficients of their bending make that shape. They're all involved with process. Lucille Park called this eccentric abstraction. Robert Pincus Whitten will call it post-minimalism. That's downstairs, or a variation of that downstairs. This is the same show, and if you look upright, there's a piece that's tied together, and over there is Jackie Windsor, who was another graduate student at Rutgers later, and at one time was married to Keith Saunier. And so you can see there's kind of vocabulary shared with different artists, just like Gary took the plaster probably from Siegel. There's like shared ideas of pulling together, tying together, so on and so forth. And this is a small piece that's downstairs. Again, it's kind of tied together, but this one's much more vicious. Also, it's bamboo, but it seems like sugar cane. It also is like fascist. It's got a lot of different readings that we can talk about that later. It's a really ambitious, really interesting, loaded piece. So, Gary gets pretty well known. From Bianchini, Rolf Ricca takes Gary's work to Cologne, to Kassel. And he's a new gallery that's showing like Richard Serra, Archwager, and he doesn't have any money to ship Gary's sculpture, so Gary goes over to Germany and makes sculptures over there. Ricca doesn't have any space, so he goes into the academy, the Arts Academy, where Arnold Bode is, to take up some space. Arnold Bode started Documenta. This is how all networks started getting happened. Arnold Bode, Documenta is like the largest every 5 years or 6 years. We almost had Documenta here in '76. That's another story. Anyway, so this is Harold Zeeman, another Uber curator, puts together in 1969 at Bern, When Attitudes Become Form, and it's art povera, it's minimalist works, it is post-minimalist stuff. That undulating piece is Gary's. It's next to those pole pieces on the floor, which are Bill Bollinger. There's another great piece of Gary's. To the right of Gary's, there's an Alan Serret. There are these little black Ovoids, those are archwire blips. There's Gary in that time period. And the piece over there behind Gary to the left is an Eva Hess piece called Viculum 2 from 1969. The show was really progressive. It went to London and it went to another place, I can't remember. It went to 3 different places and really influenced sculptural discourse during that time period. And it was so important that it got remade. So this is another view of that. This piece in the front left is this Eva Hess piece. And this is when they remade it. In 2013, the Prada Foundation took it to Italy, and they got similar or very exactly the same pieces and placed them in a different location, but sort of in the same juxtapositions of that. That's how important this show was to be in. Then in the mid-70s, Gary starts getting involved, I think, more with mythology and primary forms, but the mythological sense of the primary forms. So here we have a sphere and a cube and a pyramid. We have this other piece called Mythic Responsibility, which is downstairs, which is loaded in many, many, many ways from '76. The original was just a lawn deer that he found, concrete, like something, this kitschy thing, and he chopped the head off and got 3 of them and put it together, and then later cast them into bronze and cover them with tar, which is, if there's a thing called signature material, which is Robert Pincus-Witten's term, tar is one of Gary, and fiberglass is one of Gary's signature materials. He goes to Germany. This is actually earlier, but he starts making these paintings in Germany. This is called the Berlin series. It's a different kind of paint in Europe. It's thicker. They have a different surface. They're more geometric and more open than kind of rectilinear solids that you usually think with paintings. These 2 paintings are downstairs, which we can see. But you also see the sense of weight. And they're not painted, except for those 3 linear squiggles. The black masses are actually, he makes a little frame and pours paint into them. So they're sculptural. They're not made in the same way that most paint. He doesn't paint as a circle, but he actually casts that circle. And then he casts a circle to allude to gravity and weight and sagging. And actually the painting on the left, the bottom of it curves too. So it also, the support actually is curved also, which alludes to that sagging. And then these are later paintings, 2 of which from this series are there. And again, he's using a template, repeating the form over and over and over again as activity. Other people use templates. Jasper Johns used stencils, right? I don't think he feels comfortable with automatism, with freeing up. We can talk about psychology when we get up on and have a dialogue, but that's the only picture I have left. So thank you.
Can I just pick up where you started a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky to be a student in this really important time. Oh, like this? Okay. No, I'm not familiar with this game. I didn't realize it at the time, but I am pleased for my academic background. I didn't really study art. I didn't learn anything from art school in a way because they took you on as a more or less peer. I was friends with Siegel. I was friends with Lichtenstein. In fact, my interaction with Lichtenstein was, King, your work is hopeless. Just do whatever you want. Because I wasn't a painter and it didn't fit into his program at all, but he took me seriously and that made me take myself seriously and double down on the responsibility if I wanted to be an artist. And then to go back to the moment, I was a student in the last days of modernism. I think people don't get that too much, even very versed historians, where the prevailing view was that through the 20th century, you had to push the envelope. There was no a little this, a little of that. He couldn't make significant moves. He fell by the wayside. And when I went in as a student, that was the view. I had a small class, and only half finished. The other people I just wouldn't give the degree to because they didn't do anything. I don't think I did anything, really, but I was onto what the game was and what the idea of modernism involved, and I was really grateful for that because it pushed me to, what should I say, take the enterprise really seriously, view it from a rational point and a historical point, and try to keep things moving in that respect. And on the other side, there was really a curious families growing up situation. I'm pretty paranoid from my experience with the FBI when I was a kid, because we had surveillance and this uncertainty of what was going to happen and all that. So I was nursing this paranoia that I still have to some degree, though I have it under control. So I had two things that I had to play with. One was this making moves that were significant, and I think I probably did some things there. And the other was feeding myself. I had to survive myself, psychologically, internally, so I just was working on my own issues at that time. And I found a nice way of, I call it a dialectical way of working, where there's always some touch in what's going on that's really important to me.
So Gary,
in a personal way.
so you met George Segal early on, before graduate school. Do you think you would be here now if you hadn't met George Segal?
Probably not, because George was really inspiring to me, and it was in this personal way. I didn't have that much connection to his way of working, but I mean, I'm not Jewish, but he was like my rabbi. And yeah, he was really powerful man, and his integrity was really rock solid. So yeah, I think the seriousness of the enterprise. I used to take my work to him, and he would look, I'd put it on top of my car. And once I got caught in the wind, and the whole painting came off. I thought, what is this? It's an object. It's floating in space, but it was my paintings. Anyway, I showed him these paintings, and I was getting a little bit smart. So he looked at them, and he said, you know, friend, I would rather see one heroic failure than all these modest successes. So he's like, that really hit me in the way he intended it. I threw all that stuff out and I started to do some more reckless things, like the little painting. I don't have those paintings anymore with the sky, the earth, and the wire around it. So he pushed me in a way, really.
So you're more well known in Europe, and it's because the European dealers were interested in your work, and maybe because you had a German name, and yet the people that were in the eccentric abstraction show, not all of them, I mean, nobody knows who Don Potts is anymore, but those Louise Bourgeois, Eva Hess, Naumann, Saunier, those people got elevated to maybe not Saunier as much, but Naumann, Eva Hess, and Bourgeois became part of the Parthenon of a certain time period. Do you think if Fishback hadn't changed, or if you had a stronger gallery in the United States, that the trajectory of your reputation in the United States would be different?
No, I think I'm too difficult. I don't think it would have worked here. I mean, I would either have to really compromise and come up with a product, because so much of what was going on was talking about a signature style. You hear that now, and finding an identity and sticking with it. And that was not my idea. It was saving myself in a certain way. Where was I?
You were talking about how you don't have a signature style per se.
Oh yeah, but I was saving myself, and seriously, at the same time I was saving myself. So I couldn't do that. You know, I would have given up, and I didn't want to be the kind of artist where you find something to do and then you have a job. You have to do that for the rest of your life. I really wanted to be free to do what I felt I had to do at the time, and what suggested itself to me was where I wanted to be, and I still feel that now. Like, there's nothing better for me than to feel lost. It's like a kind of Peter Pan thing. You do something and it's over, it's over. You have to start again. And
Well, if you're not lost, you can't find yourself.
what?
If you're not lost, you can't find yourself.
Exactly.
So it's almost 5:30. Can we take a few questions? And then we can go to the gallery.
Yeah, it's enough's enough, right?
It's just because we have the 7 o'clock.
Yeah, sure.
So I would love for people to be able to see the exhibition, especially because not everybody can go in.
Very good.
Was Sid a good student?
Sid was really good, really committed, and had some sense of the stakes in a good way. I mean, toward the end of my career, I really couldn't stand it anymore teaching, because students only wanted to know how to make it. I stopped teaching graduate students.
And I never figured out how to
The
make
last
it.
4 or 5 years, I stuck with undergraduates.
I'm still finding myself.
In Sid's time, it was like a kind of optimism. It was a good time. The subject's really, really interesting, but
I would never define myself as optimistic, especially now.
Okay.
Thank you, so great to be here. Cindy and everyone, thank you for organizing such a beautiful event. Gary, I have a question. When you hear this kind of narrative about your work, is this how you create a narrative about your work?
Well, certainly a part of it. I mean, nothing was said, oh, excuse me. Nothing was said that I would disagree with. I just would say, we don't have enough time, you're just scratching the surface. You could stay with this as long as you like, and you have to bring something to it. If you don't have anything to bring to it, it's not going anywhere. So I would agree. I just initiate the whole thing, and then the process goes on, and things stay interesting over a long period of time, over 50, 60 years like that. Then something has to be there, and it has to speak to people in a certain way, and they just make what they can out of it. That's what keeps the work alive. I think that's really what keeps it alive, the fact that you don't come to the end of it. And personally, if I see work and I'm interested in it, after it stops feeding me, I just lose interest in it. You know, it's why I'm really quick in exhibitions. If it's not giving me anything, and I see myself as a pretty savvy observer, I'm out there, you know, it doesn't, so, yeah.
You can continue the conversation downstairs in the gallery or
John.
over a drink.
John has.
So any questions?
John.
John, would you know?
Modernism for you
Well, I
meant,
just think the whole narrative has shifted. Nobody talks about new anymore. It's shifted to some other things, and I don't want to get into being too cynical about this, but it's become another kind of game that has a lot to do with business, it has a lot to do with holding capital, it has a lot to do with all kinds of things, but it's a capacious art world, so you can be wherever you want to be in it. You know, the fact that there's these paintings that go for gazillions. Am I answering your question?
no, but that's fine, let's get out of here.
Sorry, I didn't get it. Catch me later.
I'll catch you later and ask.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think we
Okay.
can continue this conversation downstairs. Thank you so much.